very good evening to everybody watching. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Evening Review. My name is Toivo Njebela, your host. Tonight we are joined on the show by John Nakuta. He is the media ombudsman here in Namibia. He's also a law lecturer. And he does a lot of work around human rights and equal rights. So tonight he's going to help us understand some of his views that are expressed in an article that appeared in Namibian Sun today. It also appeared in the Namibian on Friday. John, thank you very much for making time. I appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much, Toivo, and thanks for the opportunity granted. And also allow me to greet my fellow countrymen and women in Namibia. I am currently in Germany at the University of Hamburg on a 6 weeks fellowship, rather. So yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity and the invitation.
Wonderful. Yeah, so your article it caught my eye. It's titled "The Constitution Trumps Swapo's Marriage Policy," and you went on to list the current challenges that the country face and how we have never seen the ruling party calling a central committee meeting, let alone an extraordinary one, to address some of these issues, but somehow they did recently to discuss the issue of same-sex marriages.
Yes, very much so, Toivo. As I started my article, my opinion piece, I was thinking about the various reports that one is reading, both our national documents, for example, the 2018 Labor Force Survey, and then the 2016 intercentral census document. One, of course, the 2018 Labor Force Survey mentioned that we've got a serious problem of unemployment. And those figures, obviously, as I mentioned, prior to the COVID-19 figures. In fact, the COVID-19 unemployment figures are not even available. But even before that, it states that the unemployment amongst women, amongst young people, and of rural people in the rural areas are simply frightening, above 40%. And then, in fact, the report also mentions that those ones that are fortunate to work, about 35% of those people are doing precarious work. And in other words, jobs that are very elementary, very menial, contractual work, flexible work, and so forth. And the UN, a document published by the UNDP 2019 says that about 75% of Namibians are getting an average monthly salary of about 1,300. That to me is frightening. And those are the kind of things that really should keep our political leaders and those in charge of the destiny of our country busy. And that is only with regard to unemployment and underemployment. But then the 2016 intercentral report between the two censuses, rather, says that as much as 25% of people throughout the country are living in informal settlements. In rural areas, no, in urban areas, excuse me, almost 40% of those staying in urban areas are staying in informal settlements. So for me, those are the kind of issues that the politicians should be busy with, not about who sleeps with whom and who wants to get it or get married with whom. Those are private issues. Whether we like it or not, those are private issues, and that to me is really a very serious thing.
Of course, some of the arguments so far have been to say that can issues of same-sex marriages, for example, be run concurrently with those other issues that you raised, that somehow it's not like we can only discuss one thing at a time. We can run both conversations at the same time, because there's this impression that no, we seem to prioritize this particular subject over the burning issues that face our country. Is it because this one specifically, I mean, in your case, you are more specific by saying it's actually none of Swapo's business to interfere in private sexual matters?
Right. Toiva, very relevant question, and you are right. And I'm making a very specific point to quote Mother Teresa. And of course, I didn't use the whole quote, but maybe just for context, let me just quote for you what Mother Teresa said. She said, and that reminded me really of what the ruling party and traditional leaders and church leaders are saying. Allow me to quote. She said, "Human rights are not a privilege conferred by government. They are they are every human being's entitlement by virtue of him or her being his humanity. The right to life does not depend and must not be contingent on the pleasures of anyone else, not even a parent or sovereign. We must weep that our own government at present seems blind to this truth." And that really is the core. Human rights are not privileges. They are not charity given to us by those in those in power, church leaders, our parents. These are the birthright that people are having simply by virtue of them being human beings. So why would it concern them? Coming back to your question, yes, of course, the issue of same-sex marriages, the issue of LGBTI issues, obviously Swapo, as the ruling party and all political parties, church leaders are entitled to air their opinion. No problem about that, because it is a contentious issue. But we should not lose sight of the fact that those that are identifying as LGBTQI+, they've got a right under the sun to survive and to claim their right to choose and their right to privacy. And nothing that the SWAPO leadership, the SWAPO Central Committee, the church leaders can do. There's nothing that they can do about that fact. I'm quoting Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Rights of the UN, which says very clearly, we are all born free, equal in dignity and in rights. So surely that also applies to those who are having different sexual preferences. And I don't think there's anything that we can do about that.
I mean, people have, we've seen all sorts of justifications from both sides. The LGBTQ community and those that are opposed to rights accorded to LGBTQ people. It has been, part of the argument has been this Africanness, people saying, yeah, it's not African, it's not Namibian. There are more pressing issues that we must, more pressing rights that we must consider, or it's not only rights, things that are very urgent in our country, like jobs, in the sense, exactly in the sense, no, the same way as you did, but for them is to say that these rights, these new rights, should be at the bottom of the hierarchy, that we must deal with more. So in your case, you are saying accord people, that allow people to live their lives. It's their lives. Then there are those who are saying no, that is not an urgent matter. It should be the the least of our concerns. These traditional cultures and this is not African, this is not who we are. I mean, what is your take on that?
I think in a way I'm also indirectly referring to that in my article, Toivo, because I'm saying the Namibian constitution confers rights. Not in our case, like at the topic or the theme under discussion, not the Swapo marriage policy. Um, Rights are not conferred by our traditional cultures, our cultures and norms. The Constitution confers rights on the people. And there's nothing, in fact, chapter 3 of the Namibian Constitution is solidly entrenched. It cannot be diminished. In other words, we cannot retract from what the Namibian constitution in chapter 3 is saying. In fact, Article 111 of the constitution, Article 132 of the constitution says chapter 3 of the constitution can only be improved positively. In other words, in a way to add more, but not to diminish. So, and again, coming back to the question, how does a man or two men sleeping tonight detract from the fact that we've got burning issues such as poverty and inequality? How does that stop the government from concentrating on what needs to be done? So I don't see the relevance of making that comparison. It's almost as if we are comparing pears with apples, or things that doesn't really, because no one is saying do not attend to the urgent issues that the government or the state is facing. First, let us attend to the issue of same-sex marriages. And by the way, and I think the Swapo, the statement that they've also issued after the Central Committee, and I'm glad that they've done so, because there seems to be a misconception that same-sex marriages has now been legalized in Namibia. Nothing from that, and the Swapo statement actually make that very clear. It basically only says that similar situations must be treated similarly, because that is what Article 10 in both Article 10.1 and Article 10.2 requires. Especially Article 10.1 says that people who are equally and similarly positioned, situated, must be treated similarly. In simple language, if the marriages of heterosexual couples who married outside Namibia can be recognized and accepted in our jurisdiction without any further ado, the same should apply for same-sex couples who married lawfully in a foreign country, and if they were to come back. People who are similarly situated must be treated similarly. And that is what the Supreme Court in the Dikhatsu case is saying. It is not saying recognize same sex marriages. That is really not what it is.
John, the Do you think this is a question of self-preservation by the ruling party? In other words, it's more entrenched, this whole position paper and the whole position of the party now, official position on this matter, that it was taken with one eye on 2024, and that the party prioritizes its own electoral fortunes than over the rights of these sexual minorities?
Tricky question, Toiva. I'm a legal scholar. I'm not a political scientist. So, and normally in my responses, I'm trying to stay clear from answering those kind of things. But in a way, indirectly, I'm saying that might just be a red herring. The issue of the Katso case. It might just be a strategy to deflect attention from other or things that are much, much more urgent. But be that as it may, no amount of red herring, no amount of deflection can detract from the fact that people are born equal in rights, in dignity, and in freedom. So that's all that I can say for now.
Yeah.
And also very important, why I personally take such a strong stance on this is I'm reminded about what Martin Luther Jr. said once, way back. He said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anyway. So if this kind of injustice would be allowed to happen, there's nothing that stops the ruling elite from doing something similar, just in a different context. So that's why an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So that's why we cannot just sit back and say this is with the eye for 2024, be that as it may. But also, it is seemingly not the only, it's not only Swapo that seems to do this with an eye on 2024. I've also heard some other political parties making similar statements and say that this is not right, the Supreme Court got it wrong, and whatever the case may be. So obviously, they also seems to do some campaigning and whatever using this issue, but no amount of political campaigning or short-sighted political experience detracts and takes away the fact from the from the fact that people are having rights. That's really the bottom line, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So one debate that popped up over the weekend, John, was there was a march by a group of from the LGBTQI community, and in Windhoek on Saturday, and there was one poster held by one of the people there that caused a lot of commotion and debate. There was a child, seemingly 10, 11, I'm not sure of the age, but it's a child nevertheless, and he held a placard calling for the abolishment of the sodomy law. And a lot of people, including myself, found it troubling that a child that young could be involved in something like that. Maybe not only because, and I don't want it to be understood, my opposition in particular, I don't want it to be understood just in the context that this is a same-sex issue, but in general, where sexual debates are taking place and children are involved. I mean, is it correct in your humble view?
No, it can't be correct, and there I totally agree. It's like children should be protected from any kind of manipulation. Um, in as much as I support um, the right of freedom to expression, freedom of movement, and that is basically, I suppose, what happened. Those that are pro LGBTIQ of course, has the right to freedom of expression and freedom of movement, and to demonstrate without any weapons, as the Constitution says, and violence. But surely, it's like it is not right that we would use children to fight our battles. That is pure manipulation, and I totally um, also add my voice to those that are saying that you can't be seen to abuse children and to groom children into what they probably don't even understand what is this all about. So no, I totally agree with you on that point. It is
Yeah,
wrong, 1,000 times wrong.
yeah. Now, John, as a perhaps my most critical question to you tonight, as a legal scholar, is now we have a conundrum now in the country. The Supreme Court has given its ruling on the issue of the Digashu issue, and it has become essentially it's a court order. It's how things must be done going forward. Now, when we speak to the minister, we spoke to Minister Albert Kawana of Home Affairs a week ago to say, are you now going to start processing these applications, and not only for this particular couple, but for any other couple that is in a similar situation? And he says he's waiting on the Attorney General's legal advice. So, whose advice or directive, if you like, carries more weight here? Is it the Supreme Court, or can the AG actually come in and say no and overturn a decision that has been taken by the highest court in the land?
The answer is quite straightforward. And I think, with all due respect, Minister Kawana is playing politics here. He knows as a lawyer what ought to be the case here. The Attorney General does not need to interpret that. The, the, the Supreme Court has made, and in fact, it is not, for me, um, there's no interpretation, there's no conundrum in this case. The Supreme Court said our Constitution is clear in terms of equal treatment of people, as I said, that are similarly situated. So the word spouse, as used in the Immigration Control Act, must be interpreted to also mean those ones in same sex marriages, which has been solemnized outside the country. And of course, in our legal order, a court order is the highest order that there can be. And if, for one or the other reason, they would not want to comply with that court order, these two couples, for example, and all of them that comes after them, would be able to institute legal proceedings against those officials, especially the minister in this case, and they can be found or held liable for contempt of court, which is obviously a criminal matter. And we've got examples of that. I'll give you one. Way back early 90s, the Supreme Court also ordered that Mr. Sikunda must be released. The then Minister of Home Affairs, and Mr. Sikunda, I'm not aware whether you know, Mr. Sikunda was accused for being a UNITA sympathizer. And the Security Commission, without being properly constituted, gave an order for Mr. Sikunda to be deported out of the country, and also they declared Mr. Secunda a persona non grata. The decision was challenged. The Supreme Court, both the High Court and the Supreme Court, found in favor of Mr. Secunda and ordered, amongst others, that Mr. Secunda be released. The Minister of Home Affairs then, Mr. Jerry Ekanjo, refused to release Mr. Secunda. And he was found guilty for contempt of court. So unless the Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Secunda, in this case, Mr. Kawana, or Dr. Kawana rather, wants to be on the wrong side of the law, he should continue playing this wait and see attitude because that may just count against him or even be held against him. Contempt of court. So that's what I would say in that case. It's very clear. There's no conundrum. In our order, the courts give the highest order, and a court order needs to be complied with.
Absolutely. John, thank you very much for making time really and for sharing very insightful views on a very thorny subject. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask you very kindly? I didn't do this in my position as a media ombudsman, and please do so as a legal scholar, social justice media, a legal scholar, and not as the media ombudsman. That's the only kind request that I would put to you. But thank you again for the invitation.
Yeah, I must apologize to you, John. I did use your title in this recording as media ombudsman, but I will just make a disclaimer now, as you did yourself, that you were speaking really just in your capacity as an individual legal scholar. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was tonight's show with John Nakuta, a legal scholar who says he spoke in his private capacity as a legal scholar and not as media ombudsman, but we appreciate his views and I hope you enjoy the show.